Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife. If you find us on YouTube, please subscribe and ring that bell. If you are on a podcast platform, please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. Today, we are going to be talking to an artist who started her art career at the age of 59. She began creating unique, vibrant artworks that were inspired by the world around her. And we're going to be talking about her journey of becoming an artist in midlife. Our guest today is Louise Barson. She is the artist that we are going to be learning from. Louise, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to our conversation.
I'm excited to hear about this change in midlife. What led you to, what did you do before, and how did you just make this change to become an artist?
It's quite long, because obviously being 59, I've done a number of things. For the most part, I'd been a chief financial officer in companies, so doing the accounts and strategy and things in retail and distribution. So that was a very sort of high-powered, long-hour job, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. No time to do anything like art. It's mostly go to work, speak to my family, my husband, and go to sleep and repeat. And then with the recession of 2008, I'd left a company a couple of years before that and gone freelancing. I'd had a project and it ended just as the recession really kicked in. So that was a bit of poor timing. And so there was no consultancy required or things like that. Companies were shedding jobs all over the world, never mind just the UK. And so I set up a decluttering business, and because it used a lot of, I went in and decluttered businesses as well as people's homes. And it took a lot of the skills in that I had from my career. So that was interesting, and I got awards for that business. And then in June 2013, I had a diagnosis of cancer. And I went to tell my parents, and before I told them, my dad told me that he'd got cancer, and he'd had it some years before. So I didn't tell him. But I decided to park my business for like 6 months while I had my operation and treatment. And during that time, my father's prognosis was a couple of years. 10 weeks later, he died of a chest infection, followed 5 months later by my mum, who had a chest infection. We need to avoid those in our family, I think. Obviously, that was quite a tough time with me still getting over my operation. So there was a delay to me thinking about reopening my business again. And I noticed a change in behaviour in my brother, and it turned out he had a terminal illness too. And I supported him for 3 years up to 2016. So my 6 months off my business came to be 3 years. And at that time, I was 58, and I was there thinking, right, well, what do I want to do? I'm 58, but I didn't want to be retired. And as it happened, I had to renew my passport. And one of the questions on the passport is occupation. And I didn't want to put retired down. And so I was having a discussion with my husband thinking, well, gosh, I need to do something one day. You're still working. He's 5 years younger than I am. He was still in a corporate job. So he said, well, you keep saying you're going to learn to paint. He said, so why don't you put the word artist down? So I did. I put artist on my passport. 3 months later, he was booking a holiday, and we'd already been on one, but he was booking another holiday, and he said, don't see any evidence of this artist, Louise. So, yeah, I said, right, I said, when we come back from that, I promise you, I'll get some paints and paper, I shall crack on and do it. And so when I did get back, I did, and my first thing to do, I bought watercolours and some paper, and it was heading towards Christmas of 2017. So I painted about 50 Christmas cards and in doing that, all different topics, but obviously Christmassy related, snow scenes and baubles and Christmas trees and all sorts of things. But doing those sort of 5x7 cards got me mixing colours, doing different techniques, wet and wet, dry on dry, wet on dry. And by doing it just at my kitchen table, I just learned a lot about the medium, because it didn't matter whether I got it right or wrong. And I learned then is that you can't get art wrong. And that takes away everything. All the sort of tension that people have about learning a new skill quite often is based, isn't it, about, oh, I've got to get it right, I've got to get it right. You don't need to be like that with art. And that's what makes it, for me, relaxing, is part of the relaxation, is because whatever you've done, you've done. You might want to do it different next time, but you produced what you produced. And people will see different things in your art than you see them. And I think that's another joy of art too, is that we all perceive things differently. Even colour we can perceive differently. Our eyes are different, our brains are different. So I could describe a colour to you, and we might say that it's pink or blue, for example, but what tone of blue is it? What shade of blue is it? We'd have different descriptions for it, possibly.
That's funny. I've been a makeup artist for over 30 years. And so
Wow.
the color piece is something that I was really passionate about. And so, somebody was like, well, I want a pink eyeshadow. And you'd show them pink and they're like, that's too pink. Or they want a red lipstick. Well, that's too red. And I was always like, what do you mean by too red? Like red is a bright color.
Yeah.
Unless you move, and then you start going, unless you move toward burgundy or, I love the conversation around color because it's so true. And, it's like the way we relate emotionally to color as well.
Yes.
Art gives you that ability to emote with color, which I think is one of the things I love about it.
It is. It has such an impact on us, doesn't it? In fact, I was doing something for a group today, doing some posts, and one of the things I got them to do was an exercise in slow looking. So I just gave them some hints and tips as how to slow look, gave them an image to look at, and then sort of left them to have a look themselves. And then I gave them some prompts as to how many different objects could they see in it of a certain type. And sort of said, I haven't even seen that was there, it was a detailed image. And sort of like the way that their mood have changed, because instead of the sort of 15 or 20 seconds that we will flick through images when we look at them, and apparently even in art galleries, people look at a painting for like, on average, 20 seconds. It's just crazy. So actually standing in front of one image or sitting in front of an image and just looking at it, the colours and the patterns, the movement in it will have different effects on you. Absolutely.
Slow looking. Now there's a great word for midlife. We've been running really hard and fast, and you get to midlife, it's time to slow down a little bit. I like that, slow looking. Explain that a little bit.
Well, it was something that I think because and actually during my corporate career as well, I was always very good at looking, the bigger picture, but also looking at the detail and noticing things. And I had quite a long commute from where I had on one day. It was like one job I had was maybe, 3/4 of an hour, 50-minute commute, sometimes longer. And one section was along a piece of motorway highway, a very long section. So there's no junctions joining, so you can just go along with the traffic more easily. And of course, if you were looking at the clouds and you're thinking, well, oh gosh, it's a grey day today. But then I would notice, well, there's a sort of a purpley grey, a sort of a greeny grey, a bluey grey, a pinky grey, an orangey grey, depending on where the light sources was. So they weren't just grey clouds. There was actually a lot of colour. Even on the rainiest, stillest day, if there were clouds there, you would see different colours. And then I would sit like on a walk, I notice things. So I'll pick out the littlest flower that I'm walking past that's under a hedge, or how many greens are in the hedge. Is some blue in the hedge because of the reflection of the sunlight? So I think it's just that sharing that skill with other people is to actually notice what you are. It automatically slows you down, because instead of you having sort of like hard eyes looking at something, so you'll zero straight into the detail of something. With soft eyes, you take in more of your surroundings. It reduces your heart rate, And it also increases your happiness hormones like dopamine and serotonin. And this has been proved when, science measured the effects of it. I got the word slow looking is taken from something I happened to find a couple of years ago. I've now done this all my life. I've used to play out in the field. But there's a movement called slow looking, and there is a slow looking day where they try and encourage people to look at images and art more slowly and take it in.
It's a really great skill to think about maybe evaluating your life when you're doing a reinvention, because you could potentially slow look over all the things you've done in your life and notice the nuances of the things that you enjoyed.
Yes, I think it is that way, and it's also without judgment, because these things have happened, and things have happened, or decisions have been made that you've made, or other circumstances. But it is about actually looking at how you cope with those situations, what skills and experiences you acquired during the way. And just taking the best out of it, and actually taking that best and just moving forward with it, because you can't do anything about what's past, but you can take all those skills and things and apply them going forward, or help other people acquire those skills and habits and things that will actually help them. So I think it is passing along the baton, and I think that's where people of our age group and older should maybe do more to either be involved with things where they're passing on knowledge and experience, or where younger sort of cohorts come and approach them, so that there's something that we spoke about before we recording about invisible women, and it's about a certain age you see. So we have to do everything to sort of compensate for that process, really, and continue to contribute in all the ways that we can.
Let's talk a little bit about that invisibility, because, there is this point in life where it's either the second half or the third act. Everybody calls it something different, midlife and beyond. And we have spent a life kind of front and center of doing and being and accomplishing, like you were talking about, you to this corporate job, and you're doing all of these things. And this season of life, really, there's this strange, almost expectation that we just kind of fade. And women get criticized if they try to stay vibrant. I watched this woman, she's in the UK as well. She's 59. She's been in fitness industry, and she's adorable. She's fit. And people are criticizing her because she's trying to, quote, look young. But if we don't look young, we get criticized for that too. So there's this two-sided thing, right? We're being pushed, It feels like, but then we're also being, by some part of society, it's almost like you're not there. It's this really strange thing. And we were talking about, what do we think that is? Where does that come from?
Yeah, I know, it is really, and I started reading one or two articles about it. But I think what prompted me to really look at it a couple of years ago was just looking at how there's lack of role models. So I can't speak for the ones that would be in the US or other countries around the world, but in the UK, I could probably name you, say, half a dozen fabulous women, that are over the age of 60 or over the age of 65. So I could name you, or maybe even 10, that I could name. But that would be it. Where are the rest of them when you then look at the reels of men? I sort of grew up in a time in the 70s when they were talking about equal pay for women. We're still talking about it 50 years later, which is appalling. This book by Caroline Criado Perez is called Invisible Women, and it just showed you sort of even in things like car design, women's bodies and physiology is not taken account of. So women have less accidents, but we get hurt more because we have to pull our seats further forward to drive the vehicle, and they don't account for that in the safety measures. So naturally, if you are in a bad accident, then you are hurt more than you actually would if you're a man, because your seat would be further back, and also the shape of the seat is geared for them. Our spines and bodies react differently to pressures. In medical research, things with women on county because of our hormones. They exclude us from lots of testing because our hormones would distort the results. Well, they're part of being a woman. But there was lots, and she went through different categories of society where you could almost get really incensed about it, but then you sort of think, well, that's how it is, how do we change it? One of the issues, though, is the internet. Now, an awful lot of men write programs for the internet. They also do a lot of the reporting, and there is nothing wrong with them doing their programming and their reporting, but there's not enough women doing it. So naturally, they're understandable biases that are just a natural part of being a man, just like as women, we have our biases too, and as individuals, they get included unintentionally in all these programs. So there was an interesting thing I did last week, was saying about in sport, who are the best sporting figures? And so you might come up and say Ronaldo is the best footballer in terms of number of goals scored in international football. It's not, it's the woman. And so there was a whole list of things where you could go on and correct. I'll send you the link after if you want it, where you can go in and correct, because actually, no, this is the sportswoman who actually holds this record. And this was across rugby, football, cricket, basketball. And it's just like, but the internet would report that it's men that have these top athletes, and they're actually young women. So even the information you then go and research is wrong. Because the number of people that are writing about it, of course, they put the most popular results up at the top of the internet, not necessarily the correct ones.
Interesting.
So, and it's not intended, it's not a deliberate act for that to happen. And so let's take it back to art. Where are the women in art? Where's the representation of women in art? There's a lot of different things where there are women that have painted pictures and men have taken, the benefit of that. So it might have been a husband and wife, they're both painting, and the women. And then these are cultural differences. These are past generational issues where women were chattels at home, and, the fact that you did something, oh, that's just a little bit of, something that you just, a little hobby, dear, where actually, if they sold that piece of artwork, they could get much money for it because of the quality of the artwork. So there's a new book come out, which I've ordered, called Women in Art. And so it'll actually show you over the centuries, actually, there were women painting, but because they were women, they weren't promoted. They weren't discussed because that was just a hobby for the woman. It wasn't actually, they weren't artists, but they are there, but you have to dig them out. And it's interesting. It's I suppose somebody might say that I'm a feminist or something like that. I suppose I don't regard myself particularly as one. I think for me it's more about fairness and equality, and that's always been some key drivers for me. So if I see other groups of people who are underrepresented, say, I feel equally strongly for aspects around that. But being a woman, obviously, I'll pay attention to things that affect me, because I'm a woman. But it's interesting to see there are a lot more women artists over the generations than you would think if you actually went around galleries and looked.
So when you're talking about artists, I'm having the hardest time remembering the name of this particular female sculptor, but she was in Paris, and she had done such amazing things, and she was way ahead of her time. It was the turn of the, from the 1800s to the 1900s. She had traveled the world. She still has huge sculptures in Paris. She had an installment that was taken by the Nazis. They don't know what happened to it, but she was mentored by one of the top sculptors in the world, and her name is nowhere. And so I interviewed the sculptor's nephew's wife. I got to go down the line properly. And she's trying to get this woman out there. And I live in Southern California, and we have something called Pageant of the Masters. And after I interviewed her, fascinatingly enough, they included one of her sculptures in the show. And I was so excited to know who she was. And I read the book about it. And if her name pops up, I will put it in the show notes, people. If my brain doesn't show back up, I have it on paper somewhere, and I will add it to the show notes. So, but it's just really fascinating because for what she accomplished during that time. as a female artist, single for part of it. She was married for part of it. She was single for part of it. And it's really fascinating how there's this silence.
Yeah. And I think that's about, I think that's a cultural thing. And I think, again, it's another unintentional thing, because if you or I were to write an article, if our partners or husbands or nephews or sisters or whoever were to write an article or a book or something, it would be something about something that they happen to be interested in. And of course, then it depends on how they promote it, and then to see how many people read it. And I think it's just by a cultural thing is that so many of men were out with jobs that then included disseminating information, is that you get a lot of history and other topics, including art, written from the male perspective. Not a deliberate, intentional thing whatsoever, but you will, we're all sort of inclined to enjoy different aspects. And some of it is down to whether you're male or female, what you like to enjoy or look at or anything like that. So I think a lot of it comes from there. It's unintentional bias, and because people weren't writing about these people whilst they were alive, or even writing about current artists that are there, because people aren't sort of sharing information about, that is why they remain sort of invisible. And that goes down to whether you're male or female. I mean, there's so many wonderful artists around that actually, if we were then having this conversation in 100 years' time, nobody, you might find the odd reference to a painter, but you wouldn't know anything about them. So the same thing will happen. But of course, now we're inundated with information, aren't we? So I think it's even harder to become visible, whether you're an artist or whether you're doing you have some other talent that that would be wonderful to be shared with the world. So I think, we all face this torrent of information, don't we, that flies through our day, which is why slow looking and the slow enjoyment of things is maybe a good sort of habit to acquire again, and maybe be more selective, because then that helps your attention go to things and helps you think about things more easily, and also helps you retain information too, because we stop being sort of dragonfly darting around everywhere, and just take a bit more time over things. So it brings it around that circle, doesn't it, between the real observation of life, because that's what goes into art in the end of the day, isn't it? It's things that you've observed or emotions that you've felt, and that's what you're sharing, regardless of what sort of art you create.
To your point of the invisibility and just saying, your own art, you're creating what you love. It's something to think about in terms of, I try not to bang the drum of this invisibility, of the differences between the impressions of aging between men and women. I'm aware of it, but I try not to beat the drum too hard, because at the end of the day, the only thing I really have control over is my space in the world and how I show up in that space in the world. And so I think if we can make strides, of course, but live the life that is the most authentic and aligned for us, and find other women in that same connection point, then that greater issue may eventually shift. It has shifted in different areas over the years, but what really matters is how we are not buying into the paradigms.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. In fact, I agree with you about banging the drum, because, funny enough, apart from a conversation with a couple of friends, this isn't a topic I've actually discussed. And now it happens just through conversation unintentionally. It's coming out in this podcast. So, and to a big audience. But yeah, it's the first time that I've spoken about it, if you say, like in the public domain. And it just shows you where conversations can go.
Yeah. Well, and it just because there's some truth to it doesn't mean we have to yield ourselves to it and live by it as an expectation or a reality. You know what I mean?
Yes. And some of the about the invisibility of women, because you asked, we're wondering why it happens. I think one of the things in an article that I read, was reading last week, it's actually just saying that it's part of the sort of natural cycle, if you say, is that you're born, you become productive, you might have children, families, you're then looking at your families, those families then don't require the support because they've gone on to make their own families. And then women are in this sort of, the natural cycle of being unproductive, reproductive, whereas men can carry on reproducing for a longer time. So the women would come out. But of course, we didn't used to live the length of time that we now live. And so even over the last 100 years, our longevity has increased totally. So where there might have only been a short period where women's visibility was dropping out of sight, because then you would just be helping along with grandchildren, things like that. Now we've got this long period of time where you could say, well, what is women's role in society, or what is their role now? What are they going to do with this chunk of time? And it's also happening to men more, I think, a little bit now, because their economic status may have changed for a lot of people. And so whereas they say, well, you actually worked until you dropped, almost, now there is this retirement period. And for a lot of people in modern society, that retirement period is an extending period of time, isn't it? It might have been only a couple of years after you finish work, or 5 years. Well, now it could be, 15, 20, 30, even 40 years, even longer for some people. So I think that's certainly a change that's happened in the last 100 years. When you look at the longevity of people, it certainly has bounced right up, hasn't it? So I think it then takes time for people to find what they do. And I think by making choices, this is where people in general actually can move into doing things that are creative, things that contribute to society, and such like that. So I think I think that's part of it. So it's an interesting thing as to see how it would develop. But I think choosing a creative life was absolutely the best thing that I could have done.
And that's the thing that we have in front of us, isn't it? Because regardless of what the world says, regardless of what the voices out there, whatever they are saying, we have a life that we've been given with this time to choose. And so there's this whole conversation around, what does that reinvention look like? What steps did you take as a woman to take this step in a different direction? You had things outside of your control that impacted the flow of your life, if you will, right? It changed the direction of your life. Rocks in the stream of life redirected you.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
If somebody else were in this situation feeling like, okay, I thought I was doing that, and then this happened, and now I'm, they feel like that sense of, I was doing something, now I'm not sure what I'm doing. What kind of processes or strategies or ideas could you offer a woman if she finds herself kind of in that place where you were before you moved in this direction?
Yeah. I suppose I was lucky in terms of that. I'd had my corporate career, I'd had my business. Yes, I have my husband and everything, but I've always been totally independent from being a young woman, making my own way and everything. So economically, I was at a point at 59 where having an income was a good thing, but not an absolute necessary thing. So day-to-day expenses, yes, could be taken care of by my husband's salary, but I'd contributed in other ways to, into that situation in the past. So yes, I was lucky that I didn't have to go out and say, right, what employment am I going? Because the one thing about becoming an artist is that you are not guaranteed a regular income. It will quite often come in fits and starts, particularly when you're starting out, because you've got to discover your skills, discover the aspects of art that really appeal to you and how you can apply it, and then you need to spread the word about what you do, and then actually find the people that like the art that you create, so that they start connecting with you, and obviously then that will lead through to buying things. But I wanted something that, I got the total enjoyment out of creating the thing. So I started out with just making those cards just to easily turn over things I could actually, give them out to friends and family when they had gone. But it gave me the insight into watercolour. I then went through and obviously started painting larger things. And I just happened to put one up on Facebook, and it actually was a painting of a hare. And I painted about 3 or 4 of these hares just in different colour ranges and more or less the same style, but different colour ranges. And somebody just sent me who I didn't know, but somebody must have shared the picture somewhere. I didn't know this person from Adam. And they just said, oh, is that painting for sale? And I thought, well, I've got 4 of them. So, yes, I can let one go. I only need one hare, who I have kept, actually, which is hazel hair, which... It's that one. I don't, you can see the picture.
Oh,
that's hazel.
yes.
So I've kept hazel for my own collection. Yeah. So that was hazel, but I had 3 others with different names. And anyway, this person came through and so she said, well, how much it is? And I said, well, I don't know. I haven't thought of selling it. How much do you want to pay? And they messaged back, oh gosh, I don't want to insult you. And I said, it won't be an insult. It's just information. What are you happy to pay for this painting? And she said, well, it's a present for a friend. And she said, well, I'll pay between 100 and 150 pounds for it. And I said, well, 125 pounds. Yeah, that's great. That's it. And because I thought she'd come back and say something like 75 quid or whatever. Anyway, so she paid that for it. And I was very happy. She was very happy. Her friend who got the present was very happy. And of course, when the next person came and asked me, oh, have you got a hare for sale? Which was 3 months later. I said, yes, 125 pounds. And so I decided that was the price of that size of painting, regardless of the topic. So it gave me a starting point. And it was shortly after that that somebody approached me and said, could I paint a house for them? And so I said, well, I haven't painted a house before, but you want a watercolour house? Let's do it. So I happen to know them slightly through a network group. So I said, I'll paint it for you and see if you like it. She did like it, and I got a lovely testimonial. And then after that, I thought, right, I need to draw up a contract for commissions. And so I have a 1-page contract so that there's a non-refundable element to it to actually take on the commission. And they pay the balance if they accept it. And over the 5 years, all the commissions that I've done have all been happily accepted. And it's a thing that gives me most joy, actually. I love painting myself. I love exploring. I never take on a commission that I wouldn't get joy from. And I know other artists, if somebody approached me with something and I didn't want to do the topic, I'll just say, right, not for me, but I understand what you require and I can recommend you go to, and I will mention 2 or 3 people I know in my area. But it's about the expression on people's faces when you reveal the finished painting to them. That they've asked you to paint this particular topic. It could be a treasured pet. It could be a place where they got married, a place that's got real meaning for them, and then you reveal the thing, or it could be their home, and then you reveal to it, and it's just the expression on their face. And we're quite reserved Brits, but I have had people cry. Tears of happiness, but it's just lovely. That moment's a great part of the process. It's my favourite part. So I love to do those. And it gives me great satisfaction that you've made somebody really happy, with something. And then there's my general art that I paint a thing or do, and that can, people go to exhibitions or they see it on my social media. They can approach me and ask about buying it if they so wish. There are some paintings though that like hazel and things that just won't go. And for the ones I'm not releasing from my personal collection, I do cards and prints of those. So what I found was, and I think it's my business thing, is finding the different routes to market. And I think that's something that if anybody is going into art, don't do commissions. If commissions stress you out, commissions are not your thing. Just don't do them. There's no point, and you won't create your best art if you're stressed. Yeah, and give yourself a decent deadline. Don't sort of be pressured. Oh, I need this painting and I need it tomorrow, sort of thing. No, you say this is the time that I need to do something, because painting should be created from joy. and that's when you'll produce something really good. So that's what I would say to anybody that was taken up. But think about, I sometimes do talks or workshops, but I only do them for small groups. I wouldn't like to teach a class of 10, 12, 15 people. I'm happy to do one-to-one or maybe 4 or 5 people doing a workshop. And because then you can give them your attention. Having said that, I have done a presentation in lockdown to 120 delegates in 3 sessions for a pharmaceutical company as a wellbeing day, and took them through some creativity exercises in half-hour blocks. And I must admit, I was challenging because they were back to back, but actually I really enjoyed that, and getting people to explore colour and mark making. And it was an unusual thing to do, but that I was helped then by my presentation skills from my corporate career. So it's bringing your other talents into it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So as I listen to you, I'm hearing threads, right? The threads would be what brings you joy, recognizing your skill sets and what you want to bring forward, right?
Yes.
It's really thinking about what is it that you're curious about and interested in, and what could it be? I think there's an investigation. Some people, like you and I, were like art. There's no question mark at the end of the word art. It's just maybe how I want to do the art, or what kind of art, or where I want to, what direction do you want to take it? Do you want to be a gallery artist? Do you want to be a this artist? Do you want to be a that artist? But I think that this reinvention phase that we're going through in this season of our lives is often the opportunity, like you, to take a completely different direction in your life. Because for me, it's an extension of the creative life that I've lived. I've practiced makeup art. I've done quilting. I've done all kinds of creating and color mixing with makeup in terms of taking colors and creating foundations. And so for me, art was not a left turn. Nobody's like, oh, Gina, you went into art? People were like, well, yeah, you're an artist, right? So I think it's cool that we have you and I as an example of me. It's an extension. If I look over my life, between the instruments I've played, the singing I've done, even in cheerleading, I wrote the routines, I choreographed and did the words. And, so it's like, this is just an extension of the person that I've been. And I bet if we looked at your life, there would have been that creativity showed itself maybe differently, but it was probably there. So I think that your journey probably has been, from an outsider's point of view, obviously you're a very talented artist. So there's something to that application, like you said, just play and practice, but also this joy that you find. Because one of the things we haven't talked about yet in the time we have left is how you look to nature. And we could think about what inspires you as well, right? What are the things that you find yourself reading about, talking about, looking at, watching, right? Yeah. So how does nature come into play for you?
Well, it's interesting what you were saying about yours was a continuous journey, whereas if I had my corporate career as an accountant and financial officer, that was a very analytical, strategic thing. But of course, I had to be very creative in solutions that I would come up with in business. But that would sort of say, yes, I've always had a creative streak within me. I was just applying it in a different way. But regarding nature, that stems back to childhood. And they do say, give me the child until they are 7 and I will show you the adult, And I used to spend every hour I could outside. We were lucky that we had a field nearby us where I would go with my dog. and I would take a book out and I would just sit and read in the field, but it would be the sort of the Ladybird Book of Wildflowers or insects. I was never into dolls. My pram, my doll's pram, housed my insect collection. And so I had all sorts of bugs and things in little containers and jars that I would keep and then release. I would collect them. There was a stream not far away, maybe half an hour's walk away, where I'd go and find fish and caddisflies and frogs and whatever. And the birds. And so I was always, because I was outside, that was a place where I loved to be out in the fresh air. As I say, I prefer to read outside rather than read in the house, for no other reason that what's better than sitting with your dog amongst a pile of wildflowers and grasses and hear the wind through the trees and still be in your book, off to different worlds. And so I think it's that love from my childhood and all the times I've been able to go, and we've been lucky to visit many different places around the world and see many different things. And I think that's just why art nature will be a great part of my art. And yes, I know that you can see a variety of things on my page maybe, but actually, when I'm drawing things like trees here behind me, I draw them in different styles. I mean, trees are fascinating. And so many different types of them. So I will be painting more trees and sort of landscapes now as I go in. But yes, it will go into animals and stuff. But it's about getting that clarity then, so that people actually, I have, yes, I will still paint things. I think I showed you a painting just before that's with gold leaf. I will paint things that are maybe outside the idea of nature. But I might be going to share those with a more select band, so maybe people that sign up for my newsletter, so they won't be out of the media, because then I will get known to being the vibrant landscape artist. And I think that's a way to sort of increase your visibility as an artist, is by getting known for a particular thing. So I think what I need to do now is that, yes, my vibrant colour is very much a key part of my art. If somebody wants me to paint in a more subtle palette, yes, I can do it happily. But vibrant colour for me is the impact of colour on you is there. But now I need to sort of refine what I show out to the general public more into, say, the elements of my art that I like to do, say, the trees and the landscapes. And then the things that I paint that are a little bit different, which I can show you one now if you like. So this with gold leaf, and that's figures dancing, things like that I'll do for myself. And then I might share with those in a more intimate thing. So maybe at exhibitions, so face-to-face things, or maybe to people that subscribe to my newsletter. But the general public will now begin to start seeing a more structured sort of edit of my artwork, so that they get to know me as the person who does the vibrant landscapes and trees. Mm-hmm. And then maybe years time, when I've established myself with the people that like landscapes and trees, is then say, right, here are vibrant animals. Now, it doesn't stop me in the meantime if anybody's seeing what I've done and say, yes, will you please paint my dog for me as a commission? And I can do that, because I just wouldn't put it up, into my social media. And I think that's a strategy that would help people help themselves become more visible. It's something I've resisted like mad, though, I will say. It's nice to do this for maybe the last couple of years, and I've resisted like mad, but I've seen the light.
But that's another good point, is that you've allowed yourself room to experiment. And I think in any reinvention journey, that experimentation, I think it's easy to want to like find the thing, do the thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that that's exactly how it works. It feels very much more of a journey. Like we're just going to, try it, be open and experimental toward things. I mean, some people might know exactly what they want to do. I just talked to a gal who writing, she knew she wanted to be a writer, but life, right, didn't really allow in her mind her to really focus on it. But once that last child was a senior in college, she knew, I want to write.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I think experiment is key. I mean, I think what I'm sort of saying, I will still be experimenting with different materials. I've just bought a jelly plate. We spoke about that earlier. but the work that I produce of that jelly plate will not necessarily go out into my website and social media. That is the stuff that I will share in a more face-to-face situation, or say maybe with my email subscribers. So, oh, look what I've been having a play with in the studio. So that my public, should we say, face, that you have no control of over social media, or at least I am controlling what will be going out there. And then say my more one-to-one relationship, my more intimate artistic relationships with my group of followers, they can see. I will share with them the stuff that I'm experimenting with, because art's there to be shared. So it'll just be a matter of what I curate to show the general public. So I will continue to experiment with things, because that's the joy of art too. But that will actually help me bring other things into the work that I'm going, because you have to me, regardless of what you're doing, you need to continue finding things that invigorate it and explore it and expand your knowledge of stuff. And I have been a lifelong learner. I mean, I've done so many different things over my life, and I think that all feeds into the passion that I have for what I do.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to take 3 things that you wanted to give to a woman who is heading into midlife or is in the middle of midlife and trying to still figure things out, what 3 pieces of advice would you give her?
Make a plan. So whatever it is you need to have some sort of plan. You need to have some sort of objective, because unless you have some sort of objective, then your route will just take you anywhere. You need to have some ultimate goal. And that goal can change over time, but you need to have a path, because then you can see whatever other decisions that you make along your choice, at least they are decisions. Do they help me get towards that goal? Yes, it's not always a straight line, is it? You might have to tick off, but go forward and tick off and go, but you're always heading to that goal. So I think that's a real key one to do. Find something that somehow gives you some joy and passion, because otherwise you'll get jaded very easily. So it would be great if people were doing something creative. But it could be anything, there could be some charity that you're involved in, or it could be a particular job that you're involved in. The great thing, I don't know whether it's affecting other countries, but in the USA, in the UK, there's a big job gap in the age of over 50. An awful lot of people disappeared took early retirement due to the pandemic. They made different life decisions and decided that they didn't need to be economically active. So we've got this big gap. So that actually creates a lot of opportunities for people who are 50 plus, who want to go and find work or employment, because they're wanted now in the workforce, where you might have said 5 years ago that they weren't wanted. Now they're wanted. So there are a lot of opportunities. I'm hoping that that's the case in other countries that your blog's been to. And then build up your resilience. Things happen, yes, and you need, I won't say look back, you need to review stuff, because you need to see why certain things happen. Some things are just natural processes during life, like the things I mentioned, illness, deaths, and so on. Those are mine came all along like buses all at once, but usually, they're spread out. But you need to review that, but dwelling on it doesn't get you anywhere. You need to review it, see if there's anything that you want to change, make your plan, as I say, get an objective, and then just look where you want to get it, but with joy and passion, because that will help you remain engaged. It will help you remain productive. And when you're in that position, you're in flow, aren't you? And so you're then living your best life. And if it doesn't work out, because sometimes you'll try things, they don't work out, hey, you tried it. Always look and see if you got a plan B, because that's there. And you never know what's around the next corner. So, there's always opportunities there. You just have to be open to seeing them. So it's about keeping yourself in that stage where your mind is open to the positive things, rather than the I can't. It's I can. It's not that there's nothing there for me, it's what's there for me. And your brain's very good at paying attention to what you're concentrating on. So if you say that there's nothing there for you, guess what? There is nothing there for you. If you say that there are things there for you, your brain will consciously look out for stuff and then you pop up and think, oh, yes, I can do that. But I would wish anybody well that's going on a new voyage. It can be scary and exciting, but just go for it. Keep your head up, keep a smile on your face, and keep on going.
Oh, wonderful. Louise, I want to thank you so much for reaching out to me and asking me if you could be on the show, because this is one of those opportunities that I've been looking for, to find a woman who has done the thing in midlife and beyond and made a change and taken a step and doing something courageous and very different in reinventing herself. And I feel like your art, number one, is beautiful, but you're inspiring and you're encouraging. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with us today.
Oh, well, do you know what? It's been really nice to talk to you. And thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast.
Absolutely. So, Louise, how can people get in touch with you and see your art?
You can look on my website, which is www.louisebarson.co.uk. And I've started a blog on there recently too. You can find me on social media on Facebook and Instagram as Louise Barson Art. And on YouTube, I've got a channel, Louise Barson Artist. I've got various videos up there, and I'm going to be adding more to it as I go along and develop my art practice.
That is so fantastic. And even if you're not thinking you're going to become an artist, go check out her YouTube, because sometimes it's just fun to watch another person create, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or is it just us?
Oh, you don't know. I must admit, I've got one or two time-lapse videos up on my social media and YouTube and so on. And people just love them because, something that's taken me hours to create, it just zips through in like less than a minute.
Yeah.
Benny Hill painting, but you can see it get created. So people like that.
Awesome. Well, if you happen to be with us today on YouTube, just look down below. I will have those links to Louise. If you are on a podcast platform, just head on over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 323. And the show notes will be there for you as well. And today, friends, we've been talking about Louise as an artist and her journey of reinvention in midlife and her creativity. And even if you're not considering yourself as creative or as an artist, or you're not really interested in that, these stories remind us that we can do anything that we put our mind to. And to Louise's point, what we focus on grows. So as you find yourself in this place of reinvention and you're not sure which direction to go, ask the question, what can I do? And just follow the trail that it takes you on. Maybe consider looking at some of Louise's videos, play a little bit with art, just because it can actually free up your mind. Maybe not be the goal, but it is very helpful in helping the mind become more creative in solutions as well. So maybe consider creativity as part of your journey to get you where you need to go. Friends, don't hold back. Take a step in some direction. There is really, unless it's illegal, immoral, and unbiblical, it's probably not wrong. It's probably just something that will lead you to your next best step. Be courageous, my friends. Midlife is the most amazing season of life. There's so much you can do, so much you have to offer. Just go for something and keep going. The resilience that Louise talked about, just be resilient in the process, trust it, enjoy it, and take some slow looking into your life as you go along your path. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more inspirational stories, people, and strategies with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.